Welcome back to the show. My name is Matthew Lucci, and this is The Truth, the show where we dig into anything and everything and try to get to the bottom of it, try to get to the truth. Today, we have a very, very important topic. We're talking about school boards, and we're talking about what is going on inside our schools. We see it all over the country that the left is using schools to indoctrinate our kids. And this is LGBTQ nonsense all across the country. This is social and emotional learning infiltrating our schools at all levels. And a lot of times it's the teachers that are pushing this. And I don't want to say that all teachers are bad. My mom was a preschool teacher for many years. And I know lots and lots of great teachers from all across the country. However, we also do have administrations that are allowing this to happen, including right here in the great state of Texas. And so later on in the show, we're going to bring on a Arlington ISD substitute teacher who's running for school board in Arlington ISD, one of the largest school districts in Texas. Gets overshadowed by Dallas, which is enormous, has a several billion-dollar budget. Fort Worth ISD, also enormous, also multi-billion-dollar budget. Both of those have their own unique problems and challenges, including tons of teachers who come in and try to indoctrinate the students with their leftist ideology, with their LGBTQ nonsense ideology. And then we wonder why there are so many students, so many young people identifying as the opposite sex, identifying as a cat or whatever it is. A lot of that starts in the school. It starts with the teachers affirming whatever that student thinks they are in their mind at that age. They're basically convincing these students that if you're a male, it's okay to be a girl. If you're a female, it's okay to be a boy. If you don't think that you are the body that you were born into, that's okay. This is the stuff that the schools are pushing on our kids. This is something that is being affirmed by teachers and even by other students, to the point where in many school districts, there are kids who are gay or bi or trans because their friends are, or it's the cool thing at school. And that needs to stop. But when we look across the full spectrum of a child's life as they grow up, if they're spending more of their time at school than they are at home, then school is going to become the most important thing for them socially. And so if it's accepted at school, if it's encouraged at school, then that will often matter more than what's happening at home. And that's why we, as conservatives, as people with a brain, we need to be teaching our kids at home. If you raise your child up in the right way, then they're going to go out and they're going to look at what's happening in these schools. And that is absolute nonsense. If you teach them the way of the Lord, then when they're old, they will not depart from it. We need to have more of that happening in our homes. But if you look at across the child's development, from when they're born to when they go to school, or in many cases, parents will homeschool their kids, particularly in Texas, where we have about a 500,000 children who are homeschooled because parents, for a variety of reasons, don't want to be sending their children to public school or even a private school. They prefer to teach the student in their own home and have more control over what that student is learning. We have a lot of that happening in Texas, and that's a good thing. Because it means that the parents take greater responsibility. In terms of academic achievement, when we talk about academic achievement, it's not whether someone comes from some socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter what the race of the child is or anything like that. What matters most for academic achievement is that that parent was involved in that child's life. That child had parents who were involved in their academics in some way. And we need to be more and more involved in what's going on inside the classroom because there's been a lot of indoctrination lately. There's an article that I was reading that featured a couple people that I know personally. It's from Texas Scorecard, and it was about a gentleman from Arlington named David Jarvis, who approached Arlington ISD administrators and their former superintendent and the board of trustees for Arlington ISD just to ask them what guidance they were giving to their teachers on a few key issues, including same-sex attraction, gender identity, and a biological boy wanting to use the girls' restrooms and locker rooms. What guidance, if any, is given to teachers about notifying the parents of students who ask these quote-unquote sensitive questions? And for a very long time, Arlington ISD completely ignored David Jarvis's emails. They ignored his calls. And he's gone through this series of grievances against Arlington ISD to really get them to stand up and say, look, this is our policy when it comes to LGBTQ stuff. When it comes to questions about a child's sexuality, what do the teachers do? What are they told to do or not to do? And so we'll have someone coming on a little bit later in the show to talk about what they see happening in this particular school district in Arlington ISD here in Texas, and to tell us really what's going on inside those schools, whether there is a policy or not, whether there is guidance given to the teachers or not. But that's something lots of parents across DFW are asking. And as of right now, many, many months later, I believe this happened June 8th of last year, we're coming up on the 1 year mark of the beginning of this. June 8th of last year, he was finally given a hearing, but they chose to close the hearing so that it was only him in there. They turned off the cameras. No one knows what was going on inside that room other than him. And he filed a grievance about that because it was supposed to be an open meeting. And perhaps we can have him on in the future to explain more about what's going on. But really what I want to get at here is just how these school districts, particularly the school boards, are very closed off and don't allow a lot of that information to get out. If there is a policy, we should know about it. And parents should be able to know what the policy is for their children and what's being taught in the classroom. Because if we think about it, when those children are spending more time at school during the school year than they are at home, more time with those teachers, then it is those teachers and those fellow students who are going to have the most influence on that child as they grow up. Now, that includes whether that child even stays in class for an education when they hit high school. That includes how they feel about themselves. That includes mental health. That includes a wide variety of things. And that's why it's important for us to care about what's happening in our school districts, care about who's running for school boards, and care about what it is that they're putting on their platform. Right now, we've got school districts across the state of Texas and across the country that are allowing this indoctrination to happen. We also have school districts whose administrators are so terrible at budgeting that they incur several $100 million shortfalls every single year, as is the case in Arlington ISD, where this year, Arlington ISD is experiencing a $385 million shortfall. That's $385 million more dollars that they've agreed to spend versus bring in. Their budget is about $1.24 billion this year alone. While at the same time, they want to be the ones to tell our kids how to budget. They want to tell our kids how to feel about themselves. They want to tell our kids how to do math, how to do science, how to read. And in many cases, many school districts across the country, including Arlington ISD, they're underperforming. Now, all of that is stuff that we want to be bringing up with our next guest. So, our next guest is Kathi Arocha, who's running for Arlington ISD Place 3. Kathi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for, inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we've spoken many times before, but for those listening or watching on YouTube, Rumble, wherever else, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, what you're running for, and ultimately why you chose to run for Arlington ISD.
Okay, well, again, my name is Kathi Arocha, and I am running for AISD School Board Place 3. Um, a few years ago, I had a thriving career, and I had been working there for over 26 years. And my background is in, data compliance and regulatory and budgeting and project management and so forth. So it was great. I mean, I got to work from home for the last 13 years. I mean, it was great. But there was something in me. I felt like, okay, this can't be life. And I know that anytime that I would be around kids, and I just love to talk to kids and inspire them, and especially kids that I've met that have been troubled. I understand some of the challenges, especially on an underserved kid, or a kid that has like economic issues or challenges, because I was one of those kids. And so I wanted to bring, just to inspire them that, hey, it doesn't matter where you started. It matters where you go and where you end. So I decided to go ahead and retire and early, and I became and still am an AISD substitute. So being in that role has really been an eye opener for me, and seeing the challenges that the teachers have and the kids have, seeing the challenges how the kids are struggling with school. Um, just a lot of anger issues because you see fights like all the time. And so I feel like, you know what, I enjoy being in there to really understand what's going on. And so now that I've gotten, have gotten a lot of knowledge, I now feel like, hey, you know what, I'm going to try to step it up and make another difference. And that's why I decided to run. And in fact, this is my second time running. Last year, I did run, and since then I've learned even more. And it's just been a great journey. And as you know, it's like, oh my gosh, being on the political, you just think like, oh, everything's going to be great. And my message is going to be perfect. Everybody's going to be in agreement. And it's like, no, further from the, even though you want to bring all this good, people are just like, yeah, but what about this and this? I think one of the biggest questions that I've been asked is, because of my faith. And I am not ashamed to say I'm a born again believer. I believe in Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. And they believe like, oh no, she's one of them. And it's like, you know what? I am a person that wants to listen to everybody. Period. In the story. Because at the end of the day, as I've spoken with many groups, we'll call them the left and the right, okay? The one thing we have in common is that we love our kids. We love our kids. And so we want the best for our kids. And I want to be able to be a beacon of their voice being on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for stepping up. We need great people running at all levels. Um, and
Yeah.
obviously, we've been hearing over the last several years issues of indoctrination in schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a hot button issue, especially for me when I ran
Mm-hmm.
for Congress. I heard that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is dealt with actually at the school board level. Is that something that you see happening at Arlington ISD? Or is that something that you're hearing rumors of that might happen that people are really talking to you about? Because I know people are talking to you about it.
Yeah, people are, and I'm the kind of person, let's just address the elephant in the room. And yes, I've been hearing that a lot. We don't want our kids indoctrinated. We want to raise our kids in biblical values without the influence or interjecting, what we're trying to do with our kids. We're not blind to what's happening in the world. It's just that, there's a lot of, and I hate to call it fear, but I guess it is fear that something's being done behind the curtain, right? And so, and that comes from other places that have done that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been evident that there has been some activities. As far as me personally seeing it, I haven't seen it, but I do know of people that have been sending me information that said, this is indoctrination. So what do you do? What do you do? I've been an advocate of parental rights. Okay. And we have what I always say, we got the rules of engagement within a public space, which is the public school, and it's called the Texas Education Code. And it clearly states in there that if a parent does not agree, I'm paraphrasing, does not agree based on their religious right or moral beliefs, they can opt to take that kid out. And so of that curriculum or activity. And so I had a discussion yesterday with a few folks and this subject came up, and, everyone agrees that that option is there. And I believe that, okay, well, that's good, but maybe we need to go a step further. Maybe we need to make sure that, the parents know that there's, material in there that goes against your moral beliefs, and they can have that option. But in saying that, the parents also need to be engaged and to be asking those questions as well. It's unfortunate because I've seen, some, and again, I've gone through, elementary, junior high, high school, and I have seen where there are a lot of parents that are not engaged. They're engaged when they get in trouble, but they're not engaged in asking specific questions. And for example, and I said this yesterday, in the biblical faith, I want my child to know that, that a marriage or it's between a mommy and daddy. Okay. But if there's a daddy and mommy thing, I need to know about that. Okay. Well, if there's something in the classroom that has that, it's not sexually explicit, but it's saying mommy, daddy. Okay. The parents need to be asking those questions as well. And if it is there, just like one person told me yesterday, you know what? Okay, we won't let little Susie, when I'm reading this, then I'll go ahead and excuse you. You can go do this instead. So I believe that we can work together, and because there's a lot of this, you're doing this and you're doing that. And I feel like, okay, can we take a step back and say, what can we do to stop this? Because we need to respect each other's parental lanes. I cannot judge you how you want to raise your child, and neither do I. I don't want you to be judging me how I raise my child. And so what I'm thankful for is that discussion was real. It's accepted. It's been accepted because it is all about, like I said, it's about, we love our kids. We want to raise our kids the way we want to raise them. And we don't want anybody to say, and we don't want anybody to influence them in any moral way. Just like you don't want us to be putting our hands on your kid and baptizing them and then coming home and say, guess what happened to me today? I use that example. I said, it's the same concept. So I think we need to address the issue head on and deal with it because it's there. So, and just real quick on the indoctrination, I know I've been sent some information. I haven't gotten into it because it's a lot of this, this is what this is what SEL means, social emotional learning. This is what could happen, and there's evidence that this has happened. But I always go back to, okay, is it happening here? Is it happening here? Because teachers are there for academics. They're there for academics. And the teachers I've spoken with, they're 100%. They're like, we are just a piece of the child's life. We are the academic piece. We're not the moral piece. That needs to be taken care of at home. Those discussions need to be taken care of at home. I've heard more teachers say that than anything. And then I've had other teachers say, I wish there was a guideline on what we're supposed to do, because I'm afraid to say the wrong thing, right or left, and we don't make enough money to be sued. I mean, it'd bankrupt us. Then there's fear on the teacher side. So it's like, let's address it, guys. Let's just address it. So that's my.
Yeah. So Kathi, what you're saying is there's no guideline right now about any of that.
No, there isn't. There's more of a guiding principle, like a known guiding principle. I did not get that there's a guideline, and I know the teachers have told me, no, there's not a guideline. Right.
Okay. I did want to touch briefly upon one of the other pillars that you're running on, and that's budget. I looked into it, and over the last year, Arlington ISD brought in about $750 million in revenue, spent $1.24 billion. And after bringing forward some debt relief, ultimately it comes down to almost a $400 million budget shortfall this year alone. And that's contributing to Superintendent Matt Smith's decision to let 275 non-teaching positions go over the next year. Obviously, even that won't make up the nearly $400 million shortfall. What ideas do you have going into the Arlington ISD School Board to rein in that budget shortfall, and maybe even be able to cover all your expenses as a school district?
Well, this is one of the discussions that I was having yesterday. And again, being coming from corporate America, dealing with, organizational reviews and kind of slicing and dicing. One of the things that I believe we need to look at is, where can we find efficiencies? And I say that because there have been many times I was told that, hey, they're asking for this report from this department versus they're asking for a report pretty much identical with a little added caveat from this department. I'm like, okay, it seems like you guys are asking for the same thing, but are you doing responsibility? So there's an opportunity to kind of dissect what's going on to find efficiencies. Also, what are we outsourcing? Can it be insourced? On somebody within the administration? Can it be insourced? You have to start, and what I call it, because I'm a Six Sigma black belt. A lot of people laugh because it says black belt, but basically I'm a data analyst. So you start looking at, you got all these people, you got all these responsibilities. Where can we find the efficiencies? Where can we get rid of the fat, non-value added areas, and try to trim it down? Let's look at our, vendor agreements. What do we got going on there? Can we get it cheaper? Can we get it, and I know that there's a process where, you have to be an approved vendor and things like that. But you really have to start and look at the organization as a whole. And that can be scary because a lot of people are like, oh my God, that might mean my job, or that might mean, and sometimes it might mean that. But the goal is we got a shortfall and we need to really peel the onion back and see where can we save money, where can we cut cost, where can we be efficient. And that's how we need to really look at that, because our funding, it is not gauged on enrollment. It is attendance, and attendance is it's just going down.
Mhm.
You may have a lot of kids in there, but the attendance is down, and that's a whole different other issue there. But it is driven by butts in the chair,
Mhm.
and so it's going to be challenging, but um, it's doable, and it's going to be where we're going to have to make some very hard decisions for the health of the district as a whole.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, not everyone jumping into one of these races knows that you're going to have to make the hard decisions along the way, and
Mhm.
decisions that, frankly, not everyone is going to be agreeing with. Now, I only got a couple more questions for you. One is about getting those butts in seats, because you mentioned that funding is predicated on actual attendance. And I know, particularly among some of the high schools
Oh
in
yeah.
Arlington ISD, attendance is very low. How do
Mhm.
you incentivize high school students in particular to actually go to school when there's so much else going on in the world, and other things that they could be doing with their lives? How do you teach them that it's important to show up and go to school and be in a classroom and learn things, when most of the time students will say, I'm never going to use this. Why do I need to know it?
Mhm. Yeah, I've had some kids to tell me that actually. One of the things that that the schools can do. Again, they can't control what's going on at the house, right? But I believe that, okay, we need to look at our truancy, because you're right, especially in high school. You see them walking off, and I actually brought this up to the superintendent yesterday, that they actually walk off, and they'll, I know there's like a little creek over there at where Martin is, and they'll just go hang out over there. They may be smoking weed or whatever, or grabbing their big bars, because that's what it's called. A lot of people, what's a big bar? Well, a big bar is weed. It doesn't smell, and so, and I see a lot of kids that will be high at school, and so I believe that we need to really work with our folks on the truancy piece of it, and I know when my kids were going, that was really heavy. And it was like you had kids skipping, but it wasn't anything like now, because they knew my parents going to come in, they're going to get fined. And, it seems like there's been a lax in that. And we really need to get back into trying to bring them back in. And the other thing, too, I mean, we have to have support of the parents, because we have them in school at least 40 hours. I mean, we have them more during the school than they do at home. And that's a fact. And so, but the parents need to be in partnership. And some of them are great. But the ones that are not, and they may be because they're working 2 or 3 jobs, they're just tired. And I get that. But I think we need to embrace, okay, well, identify where that's happening, and actually, like, is there something that we can do to get them more engaged? We give them a call, can we, something to try to bring them in, so that we can have that partnership. But yeah, that's skipping is a norm, leaving campus is a norm. And even though that you can leave, I think it's in junior high, but I mean, kids are leaving at ninth grade, and they just leave, walk around, roam the hallways. I see that a lot, just roaming the hallways, laughing in the bathroom. And it's a huge problem. It is a huge problem. So the truancy piece, I think, is one main thing we need to revamp that. We really need to revamp it. What needs to happen there? And maybe we can get some accountability to bring these kids back. And like you said, kids are saying, well, I don't need it. But my model, and I heard this once before, and I'm like, that's such a good saying, and I tell them all the time, like, don't you want to know what happens when you don't give up? And, and some kids to this day tell me, I remember that when you say that. I said, knowledge is power. You don't want to purposely grow up ignorant. You don't want to do that. That is not going to benefit you. So it's helped with some kids. I wish it would help everybody, but it's a partnership, and that's the only way that we can really do it.
So, Kathi, anyone in Arlington ISD could vote for you.
Correct.
There are 3 people running for your seat. What
Hmm.
makes you different from the others in this race?
Well, what sets me apart from my opponents is that I am a active AISD substitute, and I do have the insight of what's happening at different grade levels, different curriculums, different uh, schools. And so I've been able to, and because of that, I've been able to see, what's happening there, and talking to teachers and meeting parents, and them just casually just talking about, the frustrations that they have. And I had mentioned this yesterday. I said, what's really sad, what I've seen is I don't see a lot of teachers happy. I don't. The ones that, especially in the ones that I've been at, um, I don't see a lot of teachers that are happy. I see them really frustrated because kids are being very disrespectful, and they're just tolerating it, and they're having to change the way they communicate with the kids just to get down to their level, and it's something that they don't want to do. And it's very sad because a lot of teachers, I mean, they're just like, I this year is my last year. That way I can retire and I'm out. I'm out. I can't deal with this because there's so much happening, and it's really sad. So I do have that insight, and I can bring that, and like, this is real life, guys. This is what's going on. We really need to deal with these things. So,
So, Kathi, to kind of wrap up here, what is it that you need to succeed in this race, and where can voters and listeners find out more about you?
okay. Well, number one, vote for me. Vote for me, because I will be an advocate, and I definitely would be a parent's choice. And one thing that I've always said, and I continue to say, is that I will listen with nonpartisan ears. Okay. I will listen because this affects all kids. And so I want to be able to bring these things to light, and work with the superintendent. Like, I'm hearing a lot of this. We may want to deal with this, or maybe have more forums where people can voice how they feel, what their concerns are. Um, Now, I have a website called kathyforarlington.com, and you can find out a lot more about me. I definitely need your support. Recently, I was so happy and just awesome. I was placed on the DFW Conservatives, the green card. And it's interesting going through that whole process, because there's a lot of really, I mean, in-depth questions that are asked, and I'm just thankful that I was one of them that is has made it on that card. So I need your vote. There's no way that I can get in. There's a lot of voters. When you look at all the voters, like 1.2 million in last cycle, and the municipalities, I mean, 14,000. People don't realize how important the the local vote is, and then they forget that the local vote is what puts presidents in there, congressmen's in there. That's how strong the voice of the people is. But when you have, they think the federal level, because it's going to impact us. No, actually, the local the local elections, it's what's going to impact you the most. And so people need to exercise their vote, because it does make a difference. 14,000 plus is the only ones that made decisions on bonds last year, equals debt, equals more taxes, you know, and you, they put people in charge of the community. And so, on your tax dollars, and it's important that people get out there. And I really would appreciate people's vote and support and come out to some of the forums. They're on my website as well to hear more of, some of the things that I'd like to do.
Well, Kathi, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the podcast. And also,
thank you too. This is great.
Best of luck to you in your race. And we'll put all that information out in our show notes and share it on the website and all that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Kathi again for taking the time in her busy campaign schedule to join us on the show. Obviously, there are a lot of important topics that we've been discussing both before the interview and during the interview that are going on in our schools and in our community. Arlington ISD was one of the schools where teachers would come up to me and tell me that students are selling drugs laced with fentanyl to other students in middle school. And a lot of those drugs are coming from the cartels, which are using those students in our middle schools. And so these are things that need to be addressed by our school boards. They need to be addressed by our principals and our superintendents across the country. There are a lot of issues that we've talked about here on this show, including indoctrination of students, including not being able to budget. Because if you can't budget effectively and you spend more than you bring in, then you have to raise taxes to make up that shortfall. You have to ask the city and the Central Appraisal District to tweak some things so that you get more money for the school, and that ultimately comes out of our pockets. We can't be allowing that to happen anymore. So ultimately, the truth is that we have a lot of this stuff going on in our schools, not every school, but parents across the country are rightfully concerned about it. And it's up to us to put people in positions where they're actually going to be talking to us about what the policies are. And if we don't like the policies, then we can work on changing them. But first and foremost, they have to be upfront and honest about what the policies are, what they're telling the teachers, what they're allowing the teachers to do or commanding the teachers to do. And that's something that is not unique to Arlington ISD. It's not unique to ISDs in North Texas. It's not unique to ISDs in Texas. It's a nationwide problem. We need to be doing more education outside of class so that even in the school districts where we don't know what's going on inside of them, that we can fortify our children to be able to stand up and know the truth instead of whatever lies are being fed to them about what their feelings mean and how that means that they're not actually a boy or not actually a girl, not actually the way that God made them. When their teachers tell them those things, when their friends tell them those things and the teachers back it up. These are things that we need to be addressing, and I hope that this episode of the show, and by bringing Kathi on, we've been able to get a glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes a little bit. But also that it brings to the forefront of our minds these municipal elections that are coming up. Those are at the beginning of May here in Texas. I believe May 4th is election day here in Texas for municipal elections. That's the vast majority of school boards are going to be having elections May 4th, and early voting for most of those. It's going to be April 22nd to April 30th is the last day of early voting. Make sure to get out there and vote. Do research on candidates because it's important that we put the right people into position who are at the very least going to be open and honest with us about what's going on in our schools. From there, we can start to take action. But the first thing that we need is information. We need to know what is happening. We need to know the lay of the land. We need to know what the other side is trying to do. We need to know who is leading the charge for us and who's leading the charge against us. And that's not possible unless we have people in place who are going to peel back the curtain and show us what's going on. I think it'd be a great idea to do a few more of these with different folks from across the country and across North Texas, because we have these municipal elections coming up here very fast here at the end of this month. So if you want to learn more about Kathi or any of the other folks that we have coming on, check the show notes, check out our website. That's AmericanLibertyMedia.com. Join me next week as we bring more great guests on to talk about key topics and get to the truth. My name is Matthew Lucci. This is The Truth. God bless you, and God bless America.